Hey, welcome to another episode of Amp Up Solar Workshop. Today, Kenny and I are talking about the installer's pocket arsenal. This is about the small things that make a big difference on the job. Now, they may not all fit in your pocket, but maybe a small bucket will do. So we're talking about the smaller items, maybe habits and tricks that when you go to an installer job, these are going to make your job smoother, cleaner, and with a whole lot less frustration. So if you're watching live, be sure and drop your questions in the chat. We'd love to include you in the conversation. So Kenny, when you hear the word installer's pocket arsenal, what does that mean to you?
So basically it's, I would consider it maybe your bag of tricks. In this case, it'll be a bucket of tricks. But nonetheless, it's things that can help out, like for your layout, measuring and marking, getting level, getting plumb, and things like that, that you might not always think. You're always going to grab your screwdriver, your cordless tools, your Sawzall and things like this. But sometimes you might need just a good scribe, a pen, and some other things that will help you measure and lay out things.
For sure. So was there a point in your installer career that you realized that the small tools were just as important as the main equipment?
Yeah, it didn't take long, but for sure it was, we concentrated on the things like my Klein tools and things like this, and then didn't have a Sharpie, and just silly things like that, or running around like looking for a pen and things like this. So yeah, these are the things that make things really nice, and you may or may not think about it all the time. And particularly if it's DIY and maybe you're new to the solar industry, off the roof and doing with like ground mounts and things like that, you might find this a little interesting.
Very good. I'm excited to see what you've brought in your bag of tricks. So where are we starting today?
So outside of our tape, so I'll put that down here.
Tape is one of your tricks.
Yes, tape is one of your tricks.
Painter's tape.
And normally you'll have your gloves on because you're appreciating the safety part. So what I like to do is when I tear the tape off, I'll fold it down.
It's stuck to your glove.
And then it's stuck to your glove.
Yeah.
I'll fold it down. That way, even in the wintertime, you always have a little piece that you can grab there. Particularly when you're on the roof, you're holding other things. It's kind of nice. Easy to grab. And that way you're not like, trying to find the end of the tape roll here.
Yeah,
but painter's tape is great if you need to make some marks and you don't want to leave a Sharpie mark on your nice customer's, rail set or their pole.
Yeah.
You can use tape for marking, or mark on the tape where you need to. So
and then you can pull it off when you're done.
You can pull it off when you're done, and no marring, and good to go. So I guess we could start with tape. Is a good one to have around. Painter's tape. One of my favorite things is your string. There's a lot of things you can do with string, so it can help you out with your roof layout. Although we'll kind of like talk about our ground mount and laying things out on the ground construction with this in particular. So a good roll of string, it might not be something.
Does it have to have a fancy handle like that?
If you like to be fancy like me, then it's definitely a requirement, I would say. So this is our string, and behind us here, we're going to go ahead and pretend that this is like a ground mount. There's a lot of companies out there that will have you put in your pipe into the ground. And when you lay this out, I'll grab another piece of equipment from the pocket arsenal, which is your good old compass.
Okay.
So normally with a ground mount, you're going to be facing this due south. So what I would do is get my east-west line established with my compass. And we're going to pretend like these are just stakes in the ground for right now.
So we want our panels facing south because that's where we get the most of our sunlight.
That's right. Okay. That's right. And then we'll talk about the altitude, the tilt here in a second.
Okay.
So we're going to pretend this is just some wooden stakes for right now. Okay. And we're going to be drilling into the ground. We're going to dig a few holes.
There's something I can hold for you.
Maybe just see if that. Yeah, maybe just hold that for a second. So we're going to pretend we're going to have, let's say, 10 of these going, east-west, because we're going to be facing our array south. So we're going to use our imaginations a little bit today, but let's pretend we've already dug our hole to the appropriate manufacturer specs. We're going to come in with our pole here.
Now, is this string level?
This string is not level, but what I'm going to do right now is just establish to make sure that this is going to be in a straight line.
A straight line is what we're going
so
for. Okay.
So you would put this in the hole. We're going to backfill it with a little bit of concrete, and then we're going to place this to where it rests just a little bit off of that. So now we will have all of these straight in a line. And then we would grab our other little tool in the bucket. You'll notice a lot of my levels and things are going to be plastic. I generally have plastic, even though it's got a magnetic thing on it.
Also magnetic.
I use this because it's non-conductive, and working around battery banks, I've always, we'll try to get the most non-conductive things you can.
Okay.
And so we'll put that there. We can read the level. Okay, that looks good there. Check it from this side, check it from that side. You make your adjustments, and as the concrete sets up a little bit, it'll start to hold in place. But this is the way just to keep these all in one line off the ground. So that's one piece of good use for the string. Now, if you can tell,
we've done this in lining up our buckets that we use for the ground mounts too, when you're doing a temporary setup with.
That's right, with the power field, right?
The power field buckets.
Yeah. So the other thing that's great with a string level is the string level itself.
Okay.
So I don't know if you can tell from the camera, but we're trying to simulate a different gradient here. So this one's a little bit higher.
We can kind of show that, I think, with this and the level. You want to lay these on top and show that that's not level.
So it's not level. And so considering we're going to have one key point where we're going to start.
And we're going to move this up.
And let's say the manufacturers require us to have at least, let's say, 3 feet above the ground, just for an arbitrary number here. So I'm going to measure up to 3 foot, which is about
tape measure. That's one
tape measure. Another one of the things in your bucket to have. And in particular, I like this one too, because the different hash marks here actually will tell you if it's a 1/4 inch, a 16th, or a 32nd, which is kind of nice. So
yeah, it's got the 16th written right on there.
Yeah, it's kind of nice to have around.
And you're not having to count all those little marks if somebody says,
exactly,
I need a 11/16.
And when you're on the roof, it's easy to do that. So let's try to move our string up to about 32 inches.
Okay, where are we? About right?
So pretty close. Let's pretend that's exactly on 32 inches, just for our simulations
32
here.
1/16.
Yep, there we go. That's what we're looking for. And so we will pull that tight, get it somewhat where we think it's level, and then we can snap on this. And these are like 2 for like $5. They're like super cheap. But
this is what you call a line level?
This is what we call a line level. And so I will adjust this up until it's right there in the middle of the bubble.
Do you have to worry about these breaking in your toolbox or in your pocket?
Well, they're so affordable that,
yeah, but if you want to have them at all times, you certainly don't want to grab it and it be broken, right?
That's true. So generally, there's a nice place you can put those, maybe in an actual tool belt or something like that, rather than on the bottom of the bucket. Although I'm guilty of that.
Clipped on the side.
I do. Yeah, that way they're easy, so I don't have to dig around it. So in essence, now we have our level at 32 inches from the ground up, and then we would take another little tool.
Oh, are you going to mark on my
pole?
Or are you gonna
I'm not going to mark on your pole because they're really nice and shiny. So what we can do is say put our piece of tape here, make our mark. It's on the tape rather than the pole itself. And then we can make our cuts, and then these will be 32 inches above grade, but we will start here. And then if we have 10 of these down the line, you can just move this down. You can also put multiple line levels together on the same string.
All the way down your whole ground
All
mount?
the way down, and that way you can check. And some of these have some hash marks too that are pretty interesting for doing sloping. So if you're using this to put in a gutter or whatever, you can actually like put this in the level with one mark over to get your drainage correct and stuff like that. And so then you would make your cuts, and then, you know, remember this old fella, I was doing a big ground mount in California one time, and I was going to go buy a laser transit setup, and they were really expensive back in those days. They're still not really super affordable, but this old guy was just like, oh, just get some string and some string level, because string don't lie, boy. And like, I really took it for granted. I usually, and these days I can actually afford a transit, but why?
Well, when you're talking about the laser transits, you've got tripods, you've got the whole setup, it's big gear. It's nice when you've got affordable tools that are small, that don't take a lot to carry around, and they work.
And they work. Yeah. They work just fine. And also too, for your DIYers, you're already kind of taking on a lot of big tasks doing your solar install for the very first time. You don't necessarily need a transit that you're just going to use maybe one time.
Yeah, but you have to have a fancy handle for your string.
That's a must. Absolutely. So that's one of the fun things is our string and our string level. So we can kind of
take this off,
take that out of the way, and then talk about some other fun things that can be in your bucket of science, we can call it. So obviously this is a various different levels. It's nice to have a few of these around. This is a square, which is great because if you need to make a cut, if you're cutting some various like things with your saw, this can actually be placed on the piece of wood here, and then use the clamp down, and you can use the fence or the guard of your circular saw, and this can like clamp onto the board, and you'll actually have this straight edge where you can actually run and get a straight cut. If you need to make a miter, sometimes I've used this to make boxes for containers to pour concrete in, sort of the curb style stuff that we would do. These are great to have along too.
And I notice this plastic as well.
Yes, I like to have a lot of things that are plastic because they're non-conductive, and working around electrical devices, it's kind of nice to have.
They're also lighter to carry around.
Yes,
some of the metal ones.
And they're pretty affordable too.
Okay.
And so
very nice.
If you have it in your back pocket and you sit on it and you break it, it's, your feelings don't get too hurt because it was $3 instead of, $9.
On the other hand, you might not break a metal one, but it might hurt a little more.
It might. And so here's another fun thing. I've grabbed this at one of the, I don't need to mention the name, but it's a really cheap place where you can get tools, because I don't use it that often, but it's a great thing. This is an inclometer, and it can tell you what your angle is. And let's pretend that this is a in between. This is that's south facing, and you can put that here. Say, okay, my level is at, I can't actually see that from here, but I'm going to say that's probably about 10, 12 degree?
Oh, you got about 6 degrees.
About 6 degrees. So another thing this can be used for is, let's say, okay, we knew that our mark was at 32 inches, and we want to make this a latitude tilt, because generally for year round for a ground mount, you want to go for a latitude. So if you're like 30-degree latitude.
Mm-hmm.
We'll go ahead and try to find this as a 30-degree. You can actually use your rail sets. We'll keep that at our 32 inches, and we'll get this. You'll have to tell me when we're close to 30.
Up, keep going up, 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 right there.
And then we can make our mark here, and now we know where this needs to be cut and this needs to be cut to establish our 30 degrees. And then we can then use our line all the way down on the east-west sides and cut those. And we'll know that we're all consistent with our 30 degrees. And this was probably $3 or $4, not super, an inclometer.
Could your square also help you with the degrees?
It absolutely can.
Okay.
This is a little bit easier too. You got your gloves on and the whatnot. This kind of, it's a good indicator. So I like to use these, and it's a lot cheaper than a laser. So our next thing.
In your bucket of tricks.
So we talked a little about laying things out for a ground mount. Let's go ahead and talk about laying things out on a roof. And here we go back with some more fancy string. This is our chalk line.
Chalk lines are fun.
Chalk lines are fun.
They can be messy.
They are definitely messy. So there's different types of ink powders that you can use. Blue is the most, I guess, forgiving. The red stuff stays on forever. But let's say you're needing to lay out a module. So we'll use this as our kind of our mock roof, as it were. So
you want me to hold the panel up for you?
We're going to look at the mounting. So we have our mounting holes here. So we're just going to go ahead and use that for, this is where our rail is going to break across there.
Okay, so you're saying where the holes are on the back of your module is the ideal place to mount your rails?
That's correct. Okay. Yes. Unless otherwise said by the manufacturers, but that's usually why they put those there, because that's how you're going to mount them. So let's go ahead and call that 6 inches.
Okay.
And so our first rail mark, set this here on the roof, will be 6 inches down from the crest of the roof. We'll go ahead and mark that here. And then we can mark that here.
Now, where would you be starting if this was an actual roof?
So generally, I would take a look at the crest of the roof, and I'll talk about coplanar and actual level here in a minute. Because there's times where sometimes the house isn't perfectly level.
No.
Yes. More often than not, it's not.
Really?
And so if you actually use a line level up there, which I've done before, then get off the roof, and I looked at my array, and it looked like my array was crooked on the roof.
Because you were doing all of your measuring the way that you would normally do it, as if the roof was level.
If the roof was level, but it wasn't level.
Okay.
And so there's other times when the roof was pretty level, but the guys who did the tile on the roof, they weren't. And so you had this nice array, but then the tiles made it look pretty bad. So, but nonetheless, we'll assume that this is all level.
So are you measuring, though, your 6 inches from the very top of the roof, or would you have to take in other considerations there?
Generally, if I want to make it coplanar to make where it's even to the roof, I go to the crest, or maybe there's like a venturi vent or whatever that seems to be pretty uniform. So you find the most uniform starting point.
Okay.
In this case, we'll just assume that that's our right under the top cap of the to where it's actually pretty consistent.
Okay.
And so we'll 6 inches down there. Then we can take our string.
So you always start at the top and never the bottom?
It depends. You can start on the bottom, but there again, take a look at the guttering, because the guttering might not be, because you're going to want to obviously have it as a slope. to drain out of the gutter. So, and so you would pull that tight.
Can I pop it?
You can.
I love to pop this.
And so now we have our first line. And the other reason why I would use a chalk line rather than a string line is because you're on the roof, you don't want to trip.
Mm-hmm.
So that way we can just put that there. We know it's going to be up there for a while. Then we can just put our lags in or our L feet or whatever our brackets might be.
And this chalk stays really nice on the asphalt.
Yes.
Roof.
And this would be a time where I would step off the roof or have one of my colleagues step off the roof, take a look and to see if that is the top of our modules. Would that be curb appeal? Does that look right on the roof?
So at this point, you're also eyeballing it. You've measured it, but you also want to make sure that it looks right.
That looks right. Yeah.
Okay.
And so we do have a little bit of adjustability with most rail sets these days, but early on we were using unistrut and you would have to mount it right in that lobe. And sometimes there was an adjustment. So nowadays, but you know, it's good to take a kind of an eyeball as it were.
Sure.
And then we'll take our second measurement,
Let me hold that up for you.
which is going to be the space between the first rail and the second rail, which is 20.5 inches. So 20.5 inches. Actually, so we'll then measure from here. See what I almost did there, Kelly?
Got it. Measure twice, cut once.
That's right. So 20.5. There.
No.
Oh, see what I almost did again?
I got.
See, this is why I keep Kelly around. She keeps me in line. And then we'll pop another line. Get this, make sure it gets nice and powdery. We'll hold that there. And if you would do us the honors of.
You know, one thing we didn't talk about in your installer pocket arsenal was one of the most important things that we should always start with. What is it?
Oh, PPE.
It's on your head.
Safety first.
Is that where it should be, Kenny?
Well, I generally I will have them on me and then I will look around and I can't find them and they'll be on my head the whole time. But yeah, let's say we were working with our tools. We would put our safety equipment on first. I can move this out of the way.
Okay.
But I did want to say there's another thing that I will keep in my bucket of science, so to speak, is some earplugs. Sometimes there's
Along
other
with
trades.
your glasses and your gloves.
And your gloves. So although this isn't a class on PPE,
Right.
it's some things like you're not always working around other trades. Solar guys usually don't make a whole lot of noise. But if you're working around other trades, it's good to have some of these around because it can get loud on a job site. And sometimes you don't like your coworkers' music, and it's also a good idea to have that.
You know, you were telling me a story about just having to go up into an attic and pulling wire.
Yep. And this keeps the fiberglass out of your ears and stuff like that. So it's not a bad idea to have both your safety glasses on, even though you're not really cutting anything in the attic, you know, to keep that, especially if you're going to go up into the entryway that hasn't been opened in, you know, 10 years, you're going to have all sorts of things falling on you. And maybe even a good hat to keep the, you know, the spider webs and the mice poop out of your hair might be a good idea to have.
Out of your golden locks.
Yeah. So,
what else do you have in your bucket?
So let's say we are on the roof. We've just put our rail set up.
Okay.
We've mounted our 8 modules and I dropped something and it fell perfectly in the ridge of the rail set.
And you know, when we order parts, we very rarely order a bunch of extras.
That's
because
right.
It costs money.
That's right.
Right. So we have really just enough parts, maybe a few extra.
There was one time I was on a roof and we were using a brand called Schuco, and they had specific, it was in millimeters. It was a ball bearing on the end of it, the way it rolled into the tracks. So if you lost a piece of that hardware, it was probably 2 weeks before you would get another piece of hardware. So I literally did not have this, which is a nice magnetic thing, but I did run into town. And it took me an hour and a half to go and buy one of these so I could fish out that one T-bolt that had the bearing on it that was
so having one of these could really save you some frustration.
Yes. And if you guys or any of you are mechanics, they have probably an array of various things, because you could drop a nut down into your cylinder well or whatever. So yeah, these are good things to have around. And instead of taking off modules, you can just kind of slip this under there and grab that T-bolt.
I know some batteries that I've worked on have covers that you put on. But sometimes you can drop screws down inside the cover that you don't want to have to take off, because you don't really need to take off, but sometimes you have to take them off just to get the screw that you need to finish up the job. And so
also too, another thing I've done before was actually okay, so we don't have that on camera, but it was an inverter, and I backed out the terminal bus a little too far, and it dropped right into the conduit. And that was also another piece of equipment that I did not have, and so I had to fish that out of the conduit, because I was not going to take that conduit off the wall and wait 2 weeks for the manufacturer to send that. So good thing to have around is your magnetic retrieval device. And there's various sizes too. So this one, I believe you were telling me, can hold like
15 pounds.
15 pounds. So yeah, I don't know what I would drop that's that small that is 15 pounds, but hey, it's nice to know that that's around. This is also a magnetic cup to where you can actually put your hardware into, where it doesn't roll off the roof. So these are nice kind of things to have around. And this one can actually, I guess this could officially be the pocket arsenal tool, because it actually does.
I mean, I guess it depends on which pocket you're talking about, right?
That's true. That's true.
That one has a clip on it too.
So, but these are nice things to have around.
Yeah.
And you may or may not think about it, but they're not that expensive either. So we've talked about level, we've talked about coplanar. What we haven't talked about is plumb. So there's level and then there's plumb. And so this is a plumb bob. And what would you use a plumb bob for?
In solar.
In solar.
Right.
So if you're coring through to a different level, or you need to know exactly where your line is, you can establish a line right underneath. I know we don't have the inverters online, but you could drop this on center in like a 2-inch knockout.
Yeah, so if you're running conduit from an inverter or
and you can always measure that out, but this is a lot quicker, and you can make your mark once you know that. So
right where you need it to go.
And also too, if you really want to be cool, you can wear it like some solar bling.
Solar bling.
So
I love it.
Yeah. So what else do we have in here, Kelly? We've got. Okay, so we'll segue into this, but now there are some tools. This is made by a company called Solar Tools, and perhaps maybe we could get a hold of them. Maybe we could offer some of this from Signature Solar. But this is an MC tool, and so after you make your crimps, you can put your MC cable into there and twist it, and you're going to get the right perfect torque on it. So this is something I like to have around too, as well as.
So you're torquing it just the right amount.
That's right.
Not too little, not too.
Not too little, not too much, and it keeps the crimp perfectly aligned, not too far out, not too far into the MC holder.
Is that something you can do with your hands, or do you still have to use?
Yeah, that is something most people will do with their hands, or maybe but with that particular tool, it makes it to where it's everyone will be consistent.
Nice.
The other tool is one of these.
Yeah.
And if you ever buy modules and you're a DIYer,
Mhm.
this you definitely need. So this will disconnect the MC cables. And I don't know, I probably have 100 of these around, but I only have one in my bucket.
Mhm.
So it's always good to make sure you at least have one of these
Yeah.
around.
I find I'm always stuck without that, and I have to go around and get it.
Yeah.
So it's always nice to have with you.
Yes. Yes.
When
The
you're on the
idea is to
job.
have your bucket of science with you.
Yeah.
And so that and various, marking. I've got a backup pencil. It's also good to have around a good pocket knife.
Swiss Army knife. Does it have to be a Swiss Army knife?
Well, on my job sites, yes. But it can be a Leatherman for, those folks that don't use Milwaukee tools and they use
What about
DeWalt.
Gerber?
Gerbers are good.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Here
but
we are throwing around name brands, but you're a Swiss Army guy.
I'm a Swiss Army
Why do you
guy.
like Swiss Army knives?
Well, this one's got a flashlight on it.
Yeah. I've
It's
seen you
got
use the scissors a lot.
the scissors. And so that's a good segue into why I particularly like the Swiss Army knife is obviously we use zip ties
Mhm.
in our industry.
Yeah.
And, pretty soon,
Just any type of zip ties?
well, you want to make sure that you have the UV rated zip ties because often these are going to be outside and exposed to the weather. And so you definitely, don't want them to just dry and crack. And even though these are UL listed or UV rated rather, they have a lifespan. And so racking systems like Pegasus that we used with the wedge last time, they actually have some clips and wire management to help out. But one of the things I've seen quite often with zip ties is they can actually kind of be a hazard.
Yeah.
They can be very helpful, but you'll see someone like myself until I really cut myself really good was
You cut yourself with a zip tie.
yes. And what I mean by that is
Maybe we should put your PPE on before you start working with them.
I will because Kelly has called me out. I've actually got my own gloves now instead of borrowing Kelly's little bitty ones. So, but nonetheless, we've just done a bundle of wire. I'm going to use this maybe temporary, maybe it's permanent. But nonetheless, you come by, you've got your wire cutters, and you just cut it. It's no big deal.
Nobody wants to leave these long to where they look ugly. And
That's right.
They're floppy.
So
you want to cut them
you're
off.
just going to cut them, and boom, there you go. But I don't know if you guys can zoom in on that. But that right there
Pretty sharp.
is pretty sharp.
Yeah.
And when you're in the attic and you're not thinking of, like I have brushed across some of those and just cut myself really nicely. I'm in a dirty attic, you could get an infection or whatever. But if you use a Swiss Army knife with the scissors or Gerber or Leatherman, if you have to, you want to get really, really close to that and cut it flush where there's no.
Oh yeah, that's pretty smooth.
See, you didn't even need a glove for that.
No, I didn't.
So,
yeah.
So nonetheless, you want to, keep safe. Although zip ties are a great thing to have in your pocket arsenal.
And that's not going to come out if you cut it that short?
No.
Okay.
I mean, maybe with, your super strength, it might come out, but for the most part, it should be good. So.
Good to know. Well, Kenny, let me ask you this. What is that everything that you've shown us in your bucket that
I think so. Yeah.
What would be your top 3 must-have items?
Oh.
If you could only take 3 of those items out on the job site, what would be your top 3?
String levels, and probably this.
Because you're already going to have your measuring tape. That's not one that we leave without.
Yeah.
Okay.
So your various marking devices, level, and probably a few if I can bring an extra.
I said 3.
Survival item.
No,
okay.
no.
Well, it would be a I guess you could mark it with the blood after you cut yourself with a zip tie, and then make a mark that way.
Let's keep this G.
This
is a family show.
But some other things that you might not think about, but particularly for off-grid installs, we're usually bringing power there for the very first time.
Right.
And so this is a non-conductive, just a plastic flashlight that often, I know we can't see this in the inverter, but a lot of times I'll just throw this inside the inverter so I can see what I'm doing while I'm wiring it up. And also, it's just good to, kind of see what you're doing. In a lot of cases, if you are off grid, or if you're doing a grid tie job, often you have to maybe pull the meter. And so you won't have any light, and it might not be something you always just think that you're going to need on a job site, would be a flashlight during the daytime.
Right.
And so, yeah. So if you've got to cut power off, it's a good thing to have one of these around.
Well, Kenny, we do have a couple of questions.
Okay.
At 401k Solar says, which clamps and mounting system do you recommend for vertical mounted panels on steel pole building siding? Which clamps and mounting system?
I've seen that Iron Ridge had a vertical mount before. I believe Unirac has some, and I wouldn't be surprised if Pegasus and some of those. I'd have to look around, and that's a good question. I can get back with you and find out, like, who else offers that as well. Okay.
And at Chop98 says, do you all have plans to put a kit together for public, buy all at one time type gear? We do not right now. This is just kind of for your knowledge, things that we would recommend, things that you can add to your own toolkit. So this was just tips and tricks for installers that you might want to think about that you can add to your next kit for your next install. Yeah. So which would you say is the most underrated?
The most underrated. I think they're all about equally as substantial to have. But probably the most thing that's the most underrated would probably be the line level, because in our modern times, everyone wants something electronic, and they will buy a transit and a laser and all that sort of thing, and you can really accomplish the same thing, and you're only as good as you actually can cut as well. So even though you might have a laser level, it's all kind of depending on how well you can actually cut the pipe as well. So
in our economy, people are thinking you pay for what you get. So the more money that you have in equipment, they think the better off that you are. But in this case, you can carry the string and you can carry the line level easier on a site, and it works the same way. You're not lugging a whole bunch of heavy equipment.
And even though it's digital and computerized in some cases, it comes down to the human being making the cut. So, at the end of the day, if it's going to be just as straight. And again, too, like the old man's wisdom that told me when I was in my 20s, a string don't lie, boy. So I'm like, okay, it works for me.
String don't lie. I like it. Which one do newer installers usually overlook until they learn the hard way?
I would say probably the coplanar versus level. And that can be a various tools that might do that. But, here's a fun one for us. Even our last episode. So I go to mount a box, and I put a level on the box, and right as I'm about to drill a hole, I look at it, I'm like, man, that's crooked. And what it was one of the wheels of the wedge was deflated.
It was flat,
And so we were off like this. So I actually had to measure the bottom of the box and the side of the box to get things perfectly square, because level at that point was not level. So looking into coplanar versus level. Another thing, I had a cabinet maker. I was building a solar trailer, and I wanted to put in some storage cabinets, and man, everything looked beautiful in there. And we stepped back out of the trailer and noticed that everything was off by about this, because the trailer was not parked on a level thing. And so he felt really embarrassed at the end of the day that, like, everything was perfectly level, but
Right.
the trailer itself was not level on level ground. So I would
Yeah.
say coplanar versus level, definitely something that I've been caught on before. And, you know, reading your measuring tape, you know, just kind of taking your time and, you know, thinking about it, and, you know, measure twice, cut once, as they always say.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, at the end of the day, you know, an installer goes to a job to install the big equipment to make the installation work. But if you don't have these smaller tools along, you may have a lot of frustration. Your job may not look like you thought it would look in the end. And so these are going to make your job cleaner, faster, and you're going to have more confidence in the end. And it's going to look better for your customer or for yourself if you're doing it.
Yeah. And,
Right?
and they're very affordable too. So
Mhm.
hopefully that if you don't have this equipment, that you would go and get that equipment before you start putting penetrations in folks' roofs would be
Yeah.
the main thing. And make sure you have the right safety gear.
Yeah.
Always tie off. Always wear your safety protection, because your eyeballs don't grow back, and
Yeah.
you know you want to be able to see, and you don't want to fall off the roof. So
Right.
safety first. Even though Kelly has to remind me quite a few times, but nonetheless, safety first.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. So it's the smaller tools that build better habits and practical tricks that make things go a whole lot smoother with a whole lot less frustration and make people happier.
That's right.
Right.
And when you're all said and done, maybe there's a project you can do around the house,
Yeah.
like putting in a fence or helping your grandma fix her picket fence or whatever it might be.
Hanging a picture frame.
Hanging a picture frame. Yeah, it's a good one to have.
Yeah.
So
hopefully this gave you a few ideas, a few reminders, and maybe a few things that would make you want to add it to your tool bag for your next install. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Amp Up Solar Workshop. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode, and we'll see you next time right here on Amp Up.